Dorothy Forstein, 1949, Philadelphia. Her daughter saw the man take her away. Every city has a house that looks ordinary until you learn what happened inside. From the sidewalk, it may seem like nothing more than brick, windows, curtains, and a front door that opens into family life. But sometimes, the most unsettling mysteries begin in the places where people should feel safest. Not on a deserted road, not in a distant town, not in the middle of a storm. Sometimes, someone disappears from home. Dorothy Forstein vanished in Philadelphia in 1949, and the story that followed became one of the strangest missing person cases of post-war America. According to the account that shaped the investigation, Dorothy did not simply walk away. She was seen inside her own house, unconscious or helpless, being carried away by a man her young daughter did not recognize. Then the door closed behind him, and Dorothy was never conclusively found. But to understand why investigators took that claim seriously, we have to go back 4 years earlier. Because Dorothy Forstein had already survived one violent attack. In January of 1945, someone had entered her world with brutal force. The assault left her badly injured, frightened, and searching for a reason. No money was taken, no clear motive appeared, and no one was arrested. So when Dorothy disappeared years later, investigators had to consider a chilling possibility. Maybe the first attack was not the end of the story. Maybe it was only the beginning. Dorothy Cooper Forstein was, by most accounts, a well-liked woman living a comfortable life in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She was married to Jules Forstein, a man she had known since childhood. Jules had worked for the Philadelphia City Council before becoming a magistrate in 1943. His position placed him in a world where decisions could anger people, where grievances could linger, and where a ruling made in a courtroom might follow a person home. The Forstein household was a blended family. Jules had daughters from his first marriage, and Dorothy became a mother figure to them. Sources differ on the spelling of the eldest daughter's name, with some using Myrna and others using Myrna, but the younger daughter is consistently identified as Marcy. Dorothy and Jules also had a son named Edward. Together, they lived in a 3-story brick house on North Franklin Street, a home that should have represented stability after difficult earlier years. Nothing in Dorothy's public life suggested that she was in danger. She was described as friendly, social, and devoted to the children. Neighbors seemed to like her. Friends spoke with her casually. She ran errands, visited shops, and lived in the rhythm of a city neighborhood where people noticed familiar faces and familiar routines. That ordinary rhythm broke on January 25, 1945. That evening, Dorothy left the children with neighbors and went shopping. She reportedly chatted with people she knew and moved through the neighborhood without any sign that she was afraid. As dusk settled, she returned home. A neighbor later recalled seeing Dorothy near the house and noticing what appeared to be a man behind her. The neighbor did not study him closely. At that moment, there was no obvious reason to panic. Then Dorothy reached the entrance of her home, and everything changed. A man attacked her with terrifying violence. He struck her repeatedly with his fists and possibly with a blunt object until she collapsed unconscious. As Dorothy fell, she knocked the telephone off its base. In that era, a live operator could still hear what was happening on an open line. The operator heard the disturbance and alerted police. When officers arrived, they found Dorothy on the floor, severely injured. Her jaw was broken, her nose was shattered, her shoulder was fractured. She had suffered a concussion. When she regained consciousness, she could give only a fragment of what had happened. Someone had jumped out at her. She could not identify him. He had just hit her again and again. The scene made little sense as a robbery. Nothing valuable had been taken. The house had not been ransacked. There was no clear evidence that theft had been the purpose. Investigators treated the assault as an attempted murder, and Captain James A. Kelly of the Philadelphia Homicide Division became connected to the case. Police looked at the obvious possibilities, including Jules, but he was said to have had a solid alibi. Dorothy had no known enemies, and the children were not plausible suspects. That left investigators with an uncomfortable theory. Dorothy may have been attacked because of her husband's work. As a magistrate, Jules Forstein handled cases involving people who might have felt wronged or humiliated. Perhaps someone angry with Jules had chosen to hurt Dorothy instead. But theory is not proof, and no arrest followed. The case remained open in the most painful way, with a victim who survived, a family that had no answer, and a criminal who had disappeared. Dorothy recovered physically, but the attack changed her. Friends and later accounts describe a woman who became nervous and guarded. She checked locks. She worried about noises. The sense of safety inside the Forstein home had been damaged. For the next several years, the family continued forward, but the unanswered question remained close. Who had attacked Dorothy, and why? On October 18, 1949, the second mystery began. Most later accounts give this as the date Dorothy vanished, though at least one missing person listing has used October 14th as the date of last contact. For a documentary, the safest phrasing is that the widely reported disappearance date is October 18th, while acknowledging that some records differ. That night, Jules was away from home, attending a political banquet. He reportedly did not often leave Dorothy and the younger children alone after the earlier attack, but that evening he did. The oldest daughter was away visiting friends, leaving Dorothy at home with Marcy and Edward. Earlier in the evening, Jules called Dorothy before going to the event. She told him everything was fine. In later retellings, she sounded almost like her old self, calm enough to joke with him before hanging up. Around 9 o'clock, Dorothy also called a friend to arrange a shopping trip for the following day. Nothing in that call suggested fear, conflict, or plans to leave. When Jules returned home at about 11:30 that night, he found the younger children upset. Marcy and Edward were crying, and their mother was gone. At first, Jules tried to explain it in an ordinary way. Maybe Dorothy had stepped out. Maybe she had gone to see a neighbor. But the details inside the house quickly made that explanation harder to accept. Dorothy's purse was still there. Her money and keys were still there. Nothing appeared stolen. The front door was locked. Then Marcy told her father what she had seen. She said she had woken after hearing something inside the house. When she went into the hallway, she saw an unfamiliar man. Her mother was lying face down in the bedroom, apparently sick, unconscious, or unable to respond. The man picked Dorothy up and carried her over his shoulder. Dorothy was reportedly wearing red silk pajamas and red slippers. Marcy asked what he was doing. According to her account, the man did not flee in panic. He patted her on the head and told her to go back to sleep. He said her mother had been sick but would be all right. Then he carried Dorothy downstairs, left through the front door, and locked it behind him. Marcy woke Edward, and the children waited together until their father came home. It sounded almost impossible. A man had entered a locked house without obvious signs of forced entry. He had reached Dorothy inside. He had carried her out while her children were present. He had left no useful trail. No neighbor came forward saying they had seen a man carrying a woman through the street. No clear physical evidence identified him. And yet Marcy's account remained the central lead. Police were reportedly skeptical at first. A child's memory under fear can be difficult to evaluate, and Marcy's story was extraordinary. But she repeated the account consistently, and psychiatric examination reportedly supported that she believed what she was saying. Investigators now had to confront a troubling possibility. If Marcy was telling the truth, then someone had removed Dorothy from her own home with planning, confidence, and disturbing calm. The search expanded quickly. Police checked hospitals, hotels, morgues, and institutions. Descriptions were circulated. Authorities looked for unidentified women and any sign that Dorothy had been injured, hidden, or traveling under unknown circumstances. But there was no confirmed sighting. No ransom demand arrived. No body was found. No suspect was charged. Several theories formed around the case, each with serious problems. The idea that Dorothy left voluntarily struggles against the evidence inside the house. She left behind her purse, money, and keys, and her daughter described her being carried away rather than leaving on foot. The abduction theory fits Marcy's account, but it raises its own questions. How did the man enter? Why did he leave no clear trace? How could he carry Dorothy outside without being noticed? The revenge theory drew attention because of Jules Forstein's work as magistrate. If someone blamed Jules for a legal decision, Dorothy may have become the target. Later writers have discussed a man named Morris Anmuth, a textile salesman involved in an earlier dispute connected to two Philadelphia police officers. Anmuth had claimed the officers assaulted him, and the charges against the officers were later dropped by magistrate Jules Forstein. Some later accounts suggest this could have created a motive for revenge. But no public evidence proves that Anmuth attacked or abducted Dorothy, so his name belongs in the category of later theory, not established fact. The most haunting pattern remains the similarity between the two crimes. In 1945, Dorothy was attacked at or inside her home, and nothing was stolen. In 1949, Dorothy vanished from that same domestic world, and again, nothing was stolen. The first incident looked personal because of its violence and lack of robbery. The second looked targeted because of the timing, the entry, and the way the offender appeared to move through the house. But targeted by whom remains unanswered. In 1957, Dorothy Forstein was declared legally dead, with the legal date tied to 7 years after her disappearance. The petition was reportedly filed by her stepdaughter, and by then Jules Forstein had died of heart disease. Investigators acknowledged that police and private searches had failed to find any trace of Dorothy. The legal declaration closed one chapter, but it did not solve the mystery. Today, Dorothy Forstein's case survives because it resists every simple explanation. If she left, why did she leave the children in terror and take nothing with her? If she was abducted, how did the man get inside and escape so cleanly? If the earlier attack and the disappearance were connected, what motive lasted for years without ever surfacing clearly? And if the answer was buried somewhere in Jules Forstein's work, why did it never lead to a charge? The final image of the case remains painfully still. A Philadelphia house late at night, 2 children waiting upstairs, a mother gone from the rooms where she had just been living an ordinary evening, and a little girl left with a memory investigators could neither ignore nor fully explain. Dorothy Forstein was not found in the days after she vanished. She was not found in the years that followed. More than 70 decades later, the man Marcy described has never been identified, and the question at the center of the case remains unchanged. Who carried Dorothy Forstein out of her home, and why did she never come back?